Are we doing exclusive natural hydrogen or other projects? Private companies bring such good news, interesting news. Hi, and welcome to Natural Hydrogen Insights, where we will be discussing the latest industry news since last, basically. This time around, it means end of December, January, and a little bit of February. I'm Morten Stahl. I'm an industry expert, and I'm founder of specialized investor Natural Hydrogen Ventures. Let's get to it, because today we have 9 public traded companies which put out good news, and we have 3 private companies that had such good news that we need to mention it in a podcast that mainly focuses on the public traded ones. Starting out with what I think is by far the most interesting news coming out. It's from Max Power, a Canadian company focused exclusively on Saskatchewan, where they have a massive acreage position. In the time since last, they announced 3 really interesting news. The by far most interesting, obviously, is that after having drilled their first well in Saskatchewan and also the first natural hydrogen well in Canada, they have some really good results coming out. And this can be discussed forever and will be and have been in so many posts and media around. But why this is interesting is because other than just proving natural hydrogen and helium as well, it had what seems to be reservoir pressure and flow rates. It actually flowed hydrogen to the surface, and more testing will have to be done, but it looks very similar to oil and gas industry normal way of doing things. So it'll be really, really exciting to see how Max Power progresses with this and drilling more wells to find the opportune place to do this. Taking a few essence out of this release. They encountered pressure and flowing gas to the surface. 28% hydrogen and up to 8.7% helium. And you would see other announcements where they say 96% hydrogen. But what really matters is the flow, how much actually flowing. We don't know this yet, but we know that the gas it flowed with seems to be mostly nitrogen. It says there's a hydrogen-nitrogen mix of roughly 90%. So there seems to be only very little stuff that needs to be separated, which you can't probably bring to service and produce. Max Power CEO says that this Lawson, the area where they drilled it, is no longer a concept. It's a discovered geological system with gas flow, pressure, and the essential ingredients required for future commercial natural hydrogen development. So really exciting. They, at the same time, announced that they are one of their main investors, Eric Sprott, was investing more of his own money into Max Power at the open market, meaning that he was buying new shares just like the rest of us could have been doing the day of this announcement. Furthermore, building on this advantage they have of having this massive acreage position, Max Power, they announced that they'll be drilling a second well in another target, what they call the Bracken target, which will likely end up meaning that they will have even more data. Who's to say what they'll get out of this specific new well drilled? They say it's a different prospect type, but no matter, they'll end up with a lot of more interesting data, which kind of comes together and meaning the excitement that I see around Max Power is that they're funded to drill the wells. They have a massive acreage position, and they have this position what it seems to be for themselves. Many other areas in the world, in Kansas, in Nova Scotia, we'll be discussing later, Quebec, Ontario, you'll have different companies working. So you could always bet on the neighbor. If there's a good investor strategy, sometimes if you think too much excitement in one company, buy the neighbor. But this area seems to be only Max Power. So if they're right, there's no avoiding Max Power. Really interesting to follow. All right, moving on to the next company, Thor Energy. Thor Energy has alluded to it before and does again in the 2 releases they're sending out in this period. It is interesting that they are doing a 2D seismic and further advancing their prospect area. They announced this in December. What's really interesting is that in January, they announced that they received the first cash payment for the sale of one of their legacy assets. Thor Energy, like many other companies in the industry, moved into natural hydrogen from mining. And Thor Energy seems to be really, really good at turning these legacy assets into money they can spend on their new natural hydrogen strategy. Besides the 2.25 million Australian dollars they just received, they will be getting for the 4 million in the next few years. So really interesting, and must definitely put Thor Energy in a really good position to advance their exploration efforts for natural hydrogen and helium without the need to raise more funds from investors. I haven't crunched the numbers fully, but looking at the cash they must have now on their balance sheet and the cash they'll be bringing in, there's a big chance that compared to local peers, Thor Energy could be really well priced. Give it a look, crunch the numbers if you like. All right, next company, HyTerra, one of the old guys in this very young industry. HyTerra was the first company to publicly list. They're working in Kansas and have drilled 3 wells already. We're waiting for news from the wells. The more well test, more data. They did find hydrogen, but we haven't seen any flow rates, pressure, like we did in the Max Power well we discussed previously. But what they did announce in this period was that they are launching a strategic plan to become a leading global geologic hydrogen company. This is interesting. Seems to be a plan they are announcing very close to when they announced the new CEO arriving. They looks to be in a good position because they have drilled wells. They have a lot of knowledge accumulated over the years, and seems to have an investor willing to continue to back them, the Fortescue mining operation. So it'll be interesting to follow, but we will also looking forward to see more data coming out of the wells they drilled already. Next company is QIMC, a company that you cannot have avoided if you're looking into natural hydrogen, because QIMC, due to the very methodical approach they have to exploration, always gets new results that they can share with the market. Today, we'll focus on what I think is the most interesting, that they, in the beginning of February, announced that they now have 2. They announced one day after the other that they have first 1, then 2 drilling approvals in their Advocate area in Nova Scotia, their recent area of focus. This is really exciting because every time someone drills for natural hydrogen, there's a chance that we make something that could be deemed a commercial discovery, or at least just getting more clever. It's a bit difficult for me to figure out how to manage my expectation here. It's not clear to me what a good outcome would be. Would it be that they confirm some of the soil sampling and theory they have about this area, or could an outcome actually be commercial flow rates? Well, definitely something it's worth following, and hopefully they'll be drilling in this first half year of 2026. We'll see. Then we're moving on to REV Exploration. They're a Canadian company focused on their natural hydrogen efforts in Alberta. They also have quite an extensive portfolio of gold exploration assets, meaning that this is one of these companies that gives you dual exposure to what is still a very popular resource, definitely gold, and then to natural hydrogen and helium. They put out 2 interesting announcements, and the first one in January was the fact that they raised, compared to the industry, a reasonable amount of money, almost 6 million Canadian dollars, financing round led by Eric Sprott, a very known Canadian resource investor that you might remember also invested in Max Power. it's really good news that they can raise funds, and they plan to spend this mostly on their Aden Dome project in Alberta. But just south of Alberta, you have the US-Canadian border and you have Montana. And they also just recently announced that they have signed an LOI, letter of intent, to get what looks like 14,000 acres in Montana to explore for natural hydrogen and helium. The full terms of the agreement isn't out, but normally you would expect to get areas in US would be much more expensive compared to Canada, because in US you will normally be discussing with local landowners, and they have a tradition to require some cash upfront. From what is known right now, it looks to be a reasonably cheap deal, a good deal at least. Difficult to say cheap, but looks interesting, and I'll look forward to hear more about this specific deal and their move into Montana, where we do have another company operating that we'll get back to later. Next company is Helix, and this is actually already now, we'll get to that company, because Helix is mostly an helium company. They're listed in London on the AIM exchange, and seems to be moving very close to actual helium production, which could give them a cash flow that it looks like more and more likely they'll spend some of that on their natural hydrogen exploration. They are still evaluating, according to their recent press release, the potential for natural hydrogen generation in their acreage area in Montana, just like REV Exploration we just discussed. They have drilled a well for helium where they found signs that it might have a potential for natural hydrogen. And as CEO Bo Sears states, they will be, I'm just getting quick in my notes, they'll be evaluating safely, efficiently, and transparently as they move into production and advance our evaluation of the broader hydrogen opportunity. Would be really, really exciting from an industry perspective if a player that seems to be looking at a cash flow from helium production could spend some of that money on natural hydrogen. Also from an investment point of view, that could give you an opportunity to invest into natural hydrogen without it being in a only expense type of company that actually could make a profit. There are a few of these, but not many in this early stage of the industry. All right. Next company, new one, small one. It's Mongoose Mining. They just announced that they are refocusing their efforts away from mining into natural hydrogen. This is one of these companies that, at least from looking from the outside, could be doing a strategy that says, I'll benefit of what my neighbors have been doing. They have probably been looking at their Nova Scotia assets and thinking what QIMC is doing in the area looks to have some potential, and they've seen the same geologic potential in their area, giving them a good reason for switching their focus. And obviously, if the geology is the same, I don't know, I haven't checked. But if it is, and QIMC does really good, Mongoose Mining could be an interesting way to get exposure to this area. But remains to be seen how much they'll actually be moving forward with their exploration efforts. Will be worth following. All right. Something that we have followed a bit for some time is what's happening in France. Obviously, as you could see in one of our other podcasts where we discuss the general ecosystem of France, most of these companies operating in France are private companies. But there is one publicly traded company, which is called Française Energy, which I will always call FDE, so I don't screw up the French pronouncement of the company name. But FDE is a company that works in many types of energy: solar, wind, natural gas from coal bed methane, hydrogen, green hydrogen in the Norwegian subsidiary. So an interesting company that also gives you exposure to natural hydrogen. They have announced that they are drilling a 5,000 meter deep well in the Lorraine area in northeastern France, which they got quite a lot of European Union funding to do, which is great. It's the first time I've seen massive amount of money spent in the natural hydrogen industry. But the real news for this period is that they now got their license to explore for natural hydrogen in this area. A 5-year license that is really promising for the further development of potentially, I guess, in the future production of natural hydrogen. So we were kind of waiting for this to happen, and I was a bit confused of the drilling before the actual licensing, but now it turns out everything's all right, and I'll be looking out for FDE in the future to see how much they'll actually be moving into natural hydrogen. All right, the final publicly traded company of this January period is NatH2 Ventures. I don't know why it's called that, but it's seems to be a mining mineral company moving into natural hydrogen. They actually recently sold some hydrogen gold mineral claims to REV Exploration, but since then have decided to go into natural hydrogen and helium once again, having staked some new claims in Ontario. And I'll scroll down, maybe you'll recognize it's our NatH2investing.com website where we've been walking through all the news. But it has the NatH2 Ventures news on the side as well. And this picture explains well what NatH2 Ventures have done. They've taken acreage around another company's acreage area along what is the Canadian extension of the mid-continental rift. If you use natural hydrogen, mid-continental rift is also it's a geological feature that that passes through Kansas, Iowa, Minnesota, Michigan as well in the US, and is believed to maybe have the potential to create natural hydrogen. So this is mid-continental rift, but in Ontario, across the border in Canada, and it seems that NatH2 Ventures thinks that it has the right geology to produce natural hydrogen. But it's also interesting to note that just recently, as you see in the map here, if you see it, there's a company called Rift Minerals who drilled a well that encountered gas so much that it has to stop drilling. And NatH2 Ventures refers to an even older well drilled, I think 20, 25 years ago, that encountered gas in the same area that was flammable. So none of these gas shows or gas flows do we know the composition of. So we don't know if it's hydrogen. But it is really interesting to see, since we know that what the industry is looking for is not only finding hydrogen, but some kind of flow, that there was actually gas in this specific area. Whether or not this only works in the area that is covered by Rift Minerals or NatH2 Ventures had gotten it right too, I don't know. But it is really interesting to see, even if I do struggle actually knowing that NatH2 Ventures just sold some assets and now they get some new ones. So I'm not quite sure of the strategy of NatH2 Ventures. Are we doing exclusive natural hydrogen or other projects? But I will follow and update accordingly when we find out in future press releases. Then finally, we'll move to the private companies. Sometimes private companies bring such good news, interesting news, that we will cover them in this podcast as well. Starting out with Snowfox. Snowfox Discovery is a London, UK-based exploration company. They are not a public traded company. They don't have to announce what they're doing. They will probably prefer to stay under the radar. But they did announce in a local radio show in this period, end of January, that they are taking an interest in Audubon County in Iowa. This is part of the mid-continental rift system, and I think as the whole industry, it's interesting to see that there are still new companies moving into the mid-continental rift, even if it haven't yet proved commercial viability. This is where HyTerra has drilled. This is where Coloma has been drilling, but we haven't seen any commercial viable results coming out of these companies yet. Personally, I find it extraordinarily interestingly because my investment company, Natural Hydrogen Ventures, invested a few years ago in Good Energy Holdings, which operate in Iowa, including this exact area, Audubon County. And it's always great to see that others are interested in an area that we do, both for geological reasons, but also from off-take opportunity to supply ammonia to local farmers that really see this area having this opportunity. The last two ones are private companies working with what I would call stimulated natural hydrogen. If you're new to natural hydrogen, stimulated natural hydrogen is where it's not expected to be found as a free gas, but where the right geology is present. And if you stimulate these rocks mostly by injecting water, the reaction will happen and hydrogen will be created. Vema is probably one, if not the most advanced company doing this. They call it engineered mineral hydrogen, but I think most widely used term would be stimulated natural hydrogen or stimulated geologic hydrogen. This is still somehow bordering scientific wells. No news has come out of it if it's possible to produce hydrogen from these wells. But it is a good news that they are actually that advanced. I don't think anyone in the industry was aware that Vema was already at the point of drilling wells to start testing their ideas, coming out of the lab into the real world. So again, this is something that really validates the fact that stimulated natural hydrogen is much more advanced than myself included thought 6 months ago. If you're into this, I definitely recommend that you look into the podcast we did with Alexis Templeton, an expert in specifically this stimulated hydrogen. All right, the last one is stimulated hydrogen as well. It's GeoKiln, a Houston-based stimulated hydrogen company. They have actually been putting out some news releases lately, working with, I would say, brand name partners. And this is obviously a good validation of both the stimulated potential and GeoKiln, especially this time around. They're announcing MOU with Toyota, a Japanese company, to look into different aspects of how this might be commercialized. I'll let you read the full release to get the final details. I think the key point here is that big industry takes this serious and looks into it. So that is a really good note to end this Natural Hydrogen Insights of January 2026, that big companies are taking an interest into the natural hydrogen industry. I hope you enjoyed what was this time around the second version, a short version and a short walkthrough of the latest news in the industry. I hope to see you next time, where we will roughly be covering what happened in February. Thank you very much. Bye.